Well, welcome back. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Thanks for tuning in. In today's video, I'd like to share some more thoughts with you regarding Luke 21 and the days of vengeance that came upon Israel in the first century. Let's just read our text again, and then we'll dive into the lesson. Luke 21, chapter 21, verses 20 and 22. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Because these are the days of vengeance, so that all things which are written will be fulfilled. Think about this, guys. Jesus said that all things that were written, all Old Testament prophecy that was written, would be fulfilled surrounding the events of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And he called that destruction the vengeance, the days of vengeance. Now, what I want to do is let's go back to the Old Testament and understand what was prophesied to come in the days of vengeance. And I believe we're going to see an amazing parallel between what the Old Testament prophesied to come in the days of vengeance and what Jesus prophesied to come in the days of vengeance, which he placed within his generation, which is why he could say that all things written would be fulfilled in that generation. Let's go to Isaiah 35, and we'll jump in at verse 1 to 4. The wilderness and the desert will be glad, and the Arabah will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It will blossom profusely and rejoice with rejoicing and shout of joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Encourage the exhausted, strengthen the feeble. Say to those with anxious heart, take courage, fear not. Watch this. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. The recompense of God will come, but he will save you. Now, in this text, this is the days of vengeance. This is when God would come in vengeance, yet with salvation. Notice again, verse 4. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. The recompense of God will come, but he will save you. This is exactly what Jesus is teaching in Luke 21. If we just look further in the text, notice in verse 20, he said, when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, that would be the days of vengeance upon Israel. Vengeance upon Jerusalem. But look in verse 27. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Then, when these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. In the same context, Jesus has his coming on the clouds of heaven. This is the coming of the Lord in the context of vengeance upon Israel, yet with redemption for the righteous or for the elect. Now here's what else is very cool. Back to Isaiah 35. We go down to the bottom of the chapter. Let's just pick it up in verse 8. A highway will be there, a roadway, and it will be called the highway of holiness. The unclean will not travel on it, but it will be for him who walks that way. And fools will not wander on it. No lion will be there, nor will any vicious beast go up on it. These will not be found there, but the redeemed will walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord will return and come with joyful shouting to Zion. With everlasting joy upon their heads, they will find gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. So check this out. Isaiah prophesied of a time, the days of vengeance, when the Lord would come in vengeance, yet with salvation. And at that time, the redeemed would come to Zion. Jesus said in Luke 21, that when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, those would be the days of vengeance, when the Son of Man would come in the clouds with salvation or with redemption. And check this out. In verse 31, he said, when you see these things happening, recognize that the kingdom of God is near. And in verse 34, he said all these things would come upon that generation. He specifically said, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. But here's something cool. Go with me to Hebrews chapter 12. The writer of Hebrews says to his audience, he says this, remember what Isaiah said in Isaiah 35. He said, in the day of vengeance, when God would come in vengeance and salvation, the ransom of the Lord would return to Zion. Jesus said that day of vengeance was coming when Jerusalem was surrounded with armies in that first century, and that would be when he would come in vengeance and for redemption. And watch what Hebrews says. In the same generation, almost at the end of that 40-year period, this is what the writer says. He says, you have not come to a mountain that can be touched, to a blazing fire, and to darkness and gloom and whirlwind, and to the blast of a trumpet, and the sound of words, which sound was such that those who heard begged that no further word be spoken to them, for they could not bear the commandment. If even a beast touches the mountain, it will be stoned. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I am full of fear and trembling. Watch this. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem. Guys, they had come to Zion. They had come to the place that Isaiah said they would come to in the day of salvation and in the day of vengeance. Jesus said, when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, the days of vengeance, which was God's coming in salvation, in redemption, but in vengeance upon Israel, that would be fulfilled in that generation, surrounding the events of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Guys, when Jesus said all things written would be fulfilled, he was speaking of the days of vengeance that would be fulfilled. And in the days of vengeance, according to Isaiah, the Lord would come in salvation, but he would come in judgment as well. And he would establish the kingdom of God, and those who were eagerly awaiting him would come to Mount Zion, and sighing and sorrow would flee away, and they would receive the everlasting kingdom in Jesus Christ. Thanks, guys. God bless. Hope that's been a blessing.